And we are live. Hello and welcome to another episode of the weekly FreudenFreude podcast, where we bring you content to help you grow and develop as a person and as a leader.
Hi, I'm Sandra Corona,
And I am Claudia. And
and we
our
are
coaches.
coaches.
We are coaches indeed, and we're getting better at bringing the point across, I guess.
Yeah. So I'm a coach for leaders, for mid-management and young professionals.
And I help professionals, leaders, as well as their teams get to the root of problems and come up with solutions that will fit them. So today we have a very interesting topic, and we stuck it into our resilience series. And I hope that we are going to, get enough clarity about it so that you can figure out why we put it in with resilience. And the topic is, drum roll, setting ground rules when living together, or for living together, actually, much better. And first of all, I noticed, Sandra, your audio is not what we are used to. Maybe you can just explain a little bit where that comes from to set the stage.
Yes. So first of all, thank you everybody for tolerating the poor quality of the video and the poor quality of the sound. And that is because I have started packing my house. Not me personally, like I'm going to pack it. I'm preparing to move. So I'm repatriating back to the US. After 9 years in Saudi Arabia, we've decided that it's time to go back. And so now finally, I'm just doing the last touch-ups. This guy is going to go with me. So this is probably not going to be here next week, next recording. But yeah, and this is, I promise you that you won't have to deal with this until April, that there's going to be better quality back again and everything else. And it's just for the move. So thank you for helping me explain that.
Well, it is. Sorry, my monitor just turned off. It is just temporary, and such
Mhm.
is life, people. And I have heard much worse in my Zoom experience over the years. So,
Yeah.
okay, so setting ground rules for living together. I think that that's actually a topic that you kind of suggested, or we at least talked about. Can you maybe start us off with that?
Yeah. So Um, one of the news that I want to share with everybody, and that I've shared with you, Claudia, is that my father-in-law passed away about now a month and a week ago. And it's been hard for the entire family. And in his will, he gave my husband the instruction to take care of his mother. Not directly. I don't want to say things that are not specifically clear. Sorry, I had to clean something. Um, but in the Hispanic culture, there's this thing, and in many other cultures, I know uh, that you bring into your house your elders. You don't leave them behind. There's no such thing as a senior community, or leave them somewhere where they just stay there, get older, and die, right? There's no such thing as that. So my mother-in-law is coming to live with us. And I have no issue with that. But I want to make sure that I don't mess it up. I want to make sure, or I would like it to be a good experience for everybody. And I only have so much control. So I asked Claudia for some advice, and that's how the entire conversation happened. So
Right,
now, what about you? Tell us about your experience.
well, after my husband's father passed away, his grandmother, was over 90 already at that point, also came to live with us. We moved to a new house that would be able to accommodate her and her needs. And, she was living with us until she passed a number of years later. We even had a live-in caretaker live with us in the house at that moment to take care of grandma because I was business traveling a lot back in the day. And for those that don't know, my husband is of Korean origin. So his grandmother was, pure Korean, had actually grown up in her younger years in Korea. And so it was kind of nice for her to have this Korean live-in caretaker. They could speak in Korean, they could prepare these Korean dishes that grandma was used to, and so on. So, yeah, all of a sudden you go from just your husband and you living together to, having his family move in and even like complete strangers move in to help out. After, it was again just Matt and me. We had, unfortunately, a dear friend of mine one evening show up in front of our door, cat carrier in hand, because her husband of 10 years had literally thrown her out of the house and she had nowhere to go. So she lived with us for a good 6 months. And so I have these experiences of people come to live with me. But on the other hand, I also have the experience of me going to live with somebody else, meaning that when we repatriated from the United States to Luxembourg, we now, my husband and I now live in the same house than my father. It's my parents' house. My mother has passed, but we essentially live in the apartment upstairs and my father lives downstairs. But essentially it's his house. So you see that the dynamics change in all these different ways that all of a sudden you live together. Whether it be by choice or by necessity. And, a lot can go on psychologically in terms of, for some people, not necessarily for you or me, let's say, but, power play, dominance versus submission, these kind of things. Sorry, people, crap you have to, contend with and so on because it's like it's like we see everywhere in nature. It's like a dog joining a new pack, right? It's
Hmm.
like who goes there first and who's gonna, in the end come on top and establishing pecking orders and things like that. Primitively seen, I think even that happens in uh, in people living together. Is that your experience?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that you pointed out, and then that's when I thought, oh my God, how crucial our positive mentality can take us to an easy transition or it can make it difficult, right? And you mentioned something when you said, when I told you my situation, and I was like, oh, it's Rodrigo and I right now, and then, having my mother-in-law. I love my mother-in-law in like completely, and I'm not kidding anybody. I love her to death. But now I'm thinking, how is it going to be? And then you said this, that I was like a bing, this light bulb. You said, well, it's like when the first time that you get married or you live with your partner. I was like, oh my God, I don't know why it takes that little switch for me to think differently, to say, oh my God, if I was able to adjust to Rodrigo, my husband, and my mother-in-law being Rodrigo's mother, what's the difference? It's just a relearning process. That was my experience. And yes, I think, you know, I've lived with my husband, then we got married. So it was a learning process. And that's where I'm coming from. Let's put it that way. That's my experience. And then also my mother lived with me for 1 year. So
Yeah, yeah. I think you touched on this. Easy does it.
mhm,
You don't need to figure out everything on day one.
mhm,
I would not go into a situation like that expecting problems. but
Right.
rather, going in with an open mind, with the kind of, expectation that in the end everything is going to work out, and we just have to adapt and maybe in some instances come to compromises and figure out what works. And sometimes it's not going to work 100% how everybody wants, right?
Mm,
That's the point of compromise. Um, and just easy does it. Easy does it. And I think that if you already start with this intention of a positive outcome rather than this expectation of trouble,
hmm.
then a lot can already resolve itself, right? Because
Yes.
you might actually be able to talk better to each other, and so on. So that would be, or always has been, kind of my way of approaching this. Give the universe the opportunity to rise to the occasion, right?
Yeah.
And not slamming your foot down from the get go.
Exactly. Exactly. One of the things that I have that it's been drilled in my mind from my school is something that you're saying it, and I'm like, yeah, it's true. So we say that people are naturally resourceful and whole, meaning that we have to trust that people know how to manage themselves, that they're capable of understanding what it means now to live with another person, right? And now strangers, right? Strangers, how you're going to make sure that you understand that nothing's going to be a happy thing. You understand that there's no perfect scenario, but it's about compromising, right? And so I think I have to give my mother-in-law the opportunity to show us that she's naturally resourceful and whole.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that is true. That's the basic premise, I think, of expectation. However, I really think that trust is okay, but in certain instances, control is better. Meaning, need to keep a vigilant eye out. I remember when this Korean lady came, this caretaker came in, right? I mean, there were some moments where she was testing her boundaries of what she would get away with, right? Because you can also sometimes hide behind an language barrier. You can hide behind a culture difference, and so on, right? And she was kind of, testing the waters. And at that moment, it's also your responsibility, even though you go at this with an open, accommodating heart, to then say, okay, but not like that.
Okay.
Right? But
Okay.
I mean, it's true, right? I remember once I came from work and she had bathed my cat in some flowery smelling shampoo, and the cat's eyes were tearing because it wasn't cat shampoo. And I'm like, what business do you have to even like touch my cat? And actually, I would really have liked to see how she must have wrangled that cat to give her a bath. I was so upset. I was so upset. She never even looked at my cat anymore after that, because it's like, no, you have no business dealing with that. It's not your
Yeah.
responsibility. It's not in your purview. And so, you 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 give them all the opportunities and all the benefit of the doubt. But on the
Hmm.
other hand, if certain expectations that especially the ones that have been stated, are being ignored, then you just have to reinforce it. You have to say no, and say no again, maybe a little bit more forcefully. Which incidentally, I think, brings us to the whole idea of ground rules. Okay,
Okay.
this lady, her name was Young Hee, right? I had told her, do not deal with my cats. I
Okay.
told her. She knew that, that she was there to take care of grandma, and she had her own room, and she had a lot of freedom in her room. That was her space. She could do whatever she wanted. She could decorate it the way that she wanted. She had quite a lot of flexibility in her schedule, as long as she was there when grandma needed her.
Mhm.
And that they went shopping together, and she had use of a car and things like that. So there was a lot of freedom that she was given, but there were some things that were very clear. Please do not go into my office, because I was a working businesswoman. I'm like, do not go into my office, and you have no business in our bedroom either, by the way, right? So there were some things, and she also said what she needed, in terms of yeah, she wanted to be able to, at certain, because of time differences, at certain later times of the night, she wanted to be able to use the telephone,
Mm,
to call people and things like that.
right.
So yeah, of course, so you just talk about it, and you come to a mutually agreeable set of ground rules. For me, those are actually a kind of living, breathing things, meaning that, yes, you can always rediscuss. You can always amend as you learn to live together. I mean, it's not something that's chiseled in stone, okay?
Hmm.
It is valid until it is amended, but
Hmm.
always by mutual agreement, right?
Right.
So you know, um, there's just, I think, amongst um, normal adult people, conversations about how will we best live together, that has to be had beforehand, at the
Right.
onset, right?
Right. And you know what I'm thinking is that the reason why we call these the difficult conversations, it's or uncomfortable, not difficult, the uncomfortable conversations, it's because in reality, humans, we're not taught to speak up and try to make a pact or try to find a common ground on how to work together, live together, do things together, from planning to organizing to existing. Even the word existing has to be planned, right? Especially like if you think about it, let's say, let's transform it, let's take this to a workplace scenario. Usually colleagues, the reason why, and you and I have seen this with ICQ, with Chava, that the main reason why there's differences in the office is because people don't talk. They don't they don't build alliances on how to work together. There's no such conversation yet in companies that says, okay, let's sit down and let's understand each other. What's our culture? All of these things, there's no such conversation. And so, therefore, if you've never been taught how to build an alliance, to work together, to exist and to do things together, how are you capable of bringing such a thing that's never been taught to you into your life, into your personal life? So, until we learn how to build alliances, that's when we're going to be able to build better relationships with everybody that's around us. And that was the conclusion that I came up, let's say, as I was thinking about the topic, so it made sense, right? What other areas it applies and how and why we call it the what did I say?
Un-
Conversations?
Uncomfortable conversation.
Uncomfortable conversations. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And I have seen this as a team coach, obviously, in the field. Teams are like work families. You can really think about it that way. They're like work families. They're people that get pulled together, not by blood, but by this common purpose of being in a team and achieving these hopefully purposeful goals together. But there too, it's absolutely, this. how can we now leverage everybody's strengths and contributions and desires and preferences to make the whole an enjoyable, good thing to do? How will we collaborate? How will we communicate? How will we express the need that we need help? How do we express that we want to give help and so on? How do we provide feedback? I mean, all these kind of things. And actually, I must commend quite a lot of leaders that they actually do know the value of such ground rules, of such, collaboration rules, of such, coexistence rules, if you want. They know it, but knowing that it's beneficial and being able to create this conversation and hold the space for this conversation, especially when you as the leader are one of the people that also is in that conversation, it's really, really quite tricky. And so what happens is that as a team coach, it's most of the time actually the very first thing that it turns out we need to address as we go into a team coaching engagement with a team, right? Setting these ground rules, figuring these things out, even in teams that are not into the forming and norming stage, but that are already more advanced. They have worked together for a while, but to actually formalize it and really talk about it instead of assuming it, there's something very powerful and liberating in doing that, and then on top of it, giving each other permission to police it.
Okay.
Meaning, if these rules that are good faith rules and positive outcome oriented rules
Mm-hmm.
are not being held, then I think that everybody should have been given the permission formally to step in and say, "Hey, do you remember our rules? I think that these expressions or the way that you're talking right now is not in the spirit of those rules. So why don't we take a break, cool our heads, and then come back together and continue talking about this, or whatever the case may be." So that's why I think the setting of ground rules is not just a family thing or a work team thing. I think it is a group resilience skill. I think that because why? Okay, so why does it fit into resilience? Why do you think it fits into resilience?
Well, because resilience is about facing adversity or what you consider adversity, right? Then you adapt and then you learn and then you apply it, right? And then the cycle starts all over, hopefully not so much. But, it starts with something that is difficult for you to manage. And especially in the office, that's where you learn how to manage a situation. That is where you you take the experience, soak it in, learn from it, and then apply new skills, right? So that is why I think it fits into resilience, because in the office is where you also not only spend 8 hours, probably a little bit more time than at home, right? And so this is where you have most of the problems. This is where you have all different types of culture, beliefs, values, understanding, language barriers, all of these things. This is where you experience it. This is where if you don't swim, you sink.
Yeah, yeah. However, I want to challenge you a little bit on some language that you used. Earlier, I didn't, because you said it's the uncomfortable conversation. Now you
Mhm.
said you're having problems. You say that I forgot now what you said. Oh, it's difficult.
Mhm.
The setting of ground rules does not need to be an uncomfortable or difficult negotiation to have.
Mhm.
It can be absolutely, something that, okay, you have to think about it. You have to maybe become a little bit vulnerable when you mention your preferences, or you have to maybe overcome your shyness a little bit to throw your opinion in the hat. But it does not necessarily ever, it doesn't need to get to the point of antagonism or one-upmanship, or the one that screams the loudest gets the loudest voice, and so on, right? So these things can be absolutely civilized and friendly, and so on. So I just to maybe take this assumption away that it always has to be difficult. No, it doesn't, right? Uh,
Exactly. And
so
sorry to interrupt. It would be, and I would agree completely with you, that is if and only if you have actually prepared your team, like you said, as a leader, that the leader says, this is how we're going to work together and we're going to set the ground rules. But because not every single company is prepared to know how to manage, or has learned that there's these kind of programs where you can learn how to set those ground rules, you usually still have a lot of companies out there where it feels like everybody's head is on fire. That's how it feels,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
So I would agree with you. Definitely, in a perfect situation, you don't have to deal with that kind of situation. Everybody knows where they stand,
Right,
but
right.
how many other companies don't?
Right, and yes, it is definitely something that is nice to get endorsed slash enforced slash driven or initiated by the company. But these things, very much like psychological safety, do live in the bubble of the team. Right, they are
Mhm.
usually a smaller collective kind of thing. Meaning, you can even envision that with this team in this room, there is one set of rules, and over there in the next conference room with a different team, the rules
Mm.
are slightly different. That is how they agreed to do it, and that's how they work really well together. Versus your team might be a little bit different. Why? Because it's made up of a different set of people. There's a different dynamic, maybe. Maybe the context in which you work is more or less short term, and so on. So if you're in a teaming situation, you have very different rules than if you are a very small, close knit, has been together for 4 years kind of team, right? So
Mhm.
I think that there's no good or wrong way to there's no one fixed way of rules. It's just like, uh, how do you how what do you agree on? Essentially, it's everything is kind of this custom mediated, mutually agreed on set of rules. That's essentially what it is. Again, with the option that if it doesn't really work out the way that we thought it would work out, let's talk about it some more in the future. And but for me, the reason why it's a part of resilience is because it's kind of a plan B as well. It sets a solid foundation for other work to happen, because when we set rules to live together, it's already one agreement that we came to, and that also can then serve as a role model for future agreements
Correct.
that we have to make. Because I really think that being able to compromise, find these mutually acceptable solutions, or sometimes compromises, or sometimes completely new, like out of the box ways of doing something, is a really, really good skill to have. And then now you have already practiced it with this person. And also, I think, especially in terms of living together, to talk about what is acceptable and not, it just takes the pressure off. There's so many games you do not need to play to figure out whether this is something you're allowed to or not, right? It's like, are you allowed to go in that room when the door is
Mm,
open or when the door is closed,
mm,
for instance, right? Uh, like the door to the playroom or whatever is always open. Now it is closed.
mm,
Is it, are you supposed to just go in, or shall do you need to knock, or shall you just not go there? Imagine, I imagine this now from like the example I did earlier was this Korean caretaker that lived with
mm,
us, right? It's like when
mhm,
this door is all of a sudden closed, is there meaning attached to it?
mm,
Right. And so it's we talked about open and closed doors when we talked about, possibly your grandmother, right? It's like if the office door is open, she can come in. If the office door is closed,
yes.
there's an understanding then, explicit understanding that
Mhm,
you
mhm,
might be in a
mhm.
coaching session. Okay.
Exactly. Mhm,
And then it should not be taken, then it's just becomes normal that that's a signal. And it's not a signal of, I hate you, stay out of my face, but it's a signal of, I need the space for myself right now.
mhm,
And the same way for her, if she is in her room watching TV, but she keeps the door open, you can come in and join her if you want. But if
mm.
the door is closed, you would respect her privacy.
Right.
Okay,
Correct.
so then all of a sudden the door opened or closed is a non-issue, and
Mhm.
it takes away so many possibilities for misunderstandings, or you know you don't want
That's
your you don't want somebody walking in on you if you close the door, understanding that nobody would, and all of a sudden some person walks in on you. That's not an ideal situation.
not ideal. I agree with you. And you know what I was thinking? Like I've thought about them many times on how right now when we were talking about it yesterday, on how to set the rules as to the door open policy or closed door policy. I was thinking right now, how have I reacted to it in the past? Just to be fair. And I thought that, for example, being that my mom is uh an aging person. She's an old kid. That's what I like to call her. She's an old kid. Um, she when she has her door closed and I see it closed, I keep walking. I like, but because it's my mother, and I guess that I assume immediately that she's either sleeping, she's changing, or she just simply wants to be left alone or doesn't even want to bother anybody. And in my mind, I'm thinking if she wanted to interact with us, she would come out of the room. But then after a while, depending on whose house she's in, if I'm at my sister's house, I tell my sister, hey, go and knock on her door and see if she's okay. You know, I give my sister that right because it's her house. But if my mom is at my house, I do like knock on the door and say, hey, can I come in? Is everything okay? And then if she doesn't respond, I do actually crack the door open a little bit and make sure that she's okay. And then I close it back again.
Hmm. And I think that that's also part of caring for our more elderly parents,
Mm-hmm,
right? And it's the same thing. My dad, for instance, who lives downstairs, right? He is a creature of habit. He gets up early in the morning. In the summer, he goes out into his garden and things like that. So when I realized that he's still in bed at 9, or God forbid 9:30, then that for
mm-hmm.
him is so out of the normal that I will start to get nervous. And I will indeed go and enter what I call his inner sanctum, where I never enter. It's not my place, and
Yeah.
I I would knock and I would just, gently say, "Are you okay?" And then if he grunts, "Uh-huh," then I just leave, right? I don't need to wake him up, but it's just one of those things that I think that's what we're there for, because what if indeed something is wrong, right?
Exactly.
And if you know that a person for 80 years has never been in bed at 9:30 in the morning, you know that something is out of the
Yeah,
extraordinary. Yeah.
exactly. You rely on your instinct, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I printed
But
out.
that can also be a rule, right? That it will not be misconstrued if, the situation appears to you out of the extraordinary, that you can go and check on her.
Oh, that's a good point. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
That it's not to control her, it's just out of a sense of security and
Hmm.
caring,
Hmm.
that if you really perceive it, if you perceive it as being that something might be wrong, that she gives you permission to come in and check.
Yep. Yep. Good point. I remember that a situation like this, God, I would say that about 4 years ago, it would fill me up with negative thoughts, with my gremlin would just be like going crazy, telling me, what about this? What about that? What if this? What if that? And blah, 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 all of these negative things that could go wrong versus what could go right. And how could you make it go right? I printed out in honor of my gremlin, I printed out a gremlin. I don't know if you can see
Oh
him.
my God, the Gremlin. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yes,
remember Spielberg
yeah,
movie. Spielberg movie
yes.
from way back in the day, people. Watch the Gremlin.
Yes. And so I thought that that was a really great picture because it helps me that when I'm starting to think negative, I turn around and I see my gremlin like, ha, 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 enjoying himself, that he's seeing me go through all of these stages of grief, when in reality, it's all just a belief. It's all just an idea. And once you realize that you are just full of assumptions, then resilience starts kicking in, right? It starts telling you, hey, remember this, remember that. You already have this value. You already have this in place. Use your allies, your like for example, I have the Black Panther. I think I've mentioned this before. For me, the Black Panther is the one that gives me strength. So I have my Black Panther booklet here, and I have my Gremlin, and so therefore, what's the instinct that my brain has is to say, oh, this guy is laughing at me. Oh, okay, I have to be a panther. I have to work myself up. So, I think about how, and if it's okay with you, now I'm thinking, how can we, because we're at 8:42, so I think a lot of people would appreciate if we were to give them some pointers or some questions that they can use towards building some resilience. What do you think? Do you want to add something else, or do you want to go to this
In
stage?
terms of building resilience, or in terms of knowing how to set ground rules or have this conversation?
You know what? Let's set some ground rules, some questions to set some ground rules. That's a good point. Yeah.
Right, right, right. Well, first of all, I want to open a parenthesis that, maybe you are not able to come to a resolution of this if you start having this discussion with people that now you need to live together with, or that you need to, what you call it, work together with, right? Because
Hmm.
sometimes it's really hard when you're on one hand the one who kind of has to manage the discussion and partake in the discussion. That's sometimes not really easy, especially if tempers do run high. So there's help for that. In the workplace, you can call on a team coach. You can call on a coach or on a mediator, if you need some extra help. I mean, a mediator, I am certified as a mediator. You would go there and you would say, okay, I'm just here to help you guys have a fruitful conversation. That's my job, and here's the process of how we're going to do that. And let's agree on the items that we have to discuss, and then let's have a constructive conversation about that. And it's somebody, the mediator is not somebody who makes decisions for you. Obviously, that's your prerogative, that's your job and your responsibility. But it's somebody who manages the dialogue and the
Hmm.
coming together and the pardon my French, the weeding of the bullshit, and the dialing down maybe of emotions that run too high and things like that. It's just a much more structured thing. It's a professional who has learned how to do that. And there's workplace mediation, there's mediation in families. It's absolutely the case. So I close that parenthesis. If you can't do it by yourself, get help. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. I agree with you.
So that being said, how would you start this off, Sandra?
I think we're, what I want to do is pull from the entire conversation and bring them all together like in this little space so that it sets it clear for people. So I would start with initiating a group discussion, right? Which is what I've been saying, which is create an alliance. And when you gather as a family, when you gather in to say, okay, we're here because we want to make things better, it's all also about the approach, right? It's not just getting together and then boom, 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 boom. No, there has to be willingness. And there is a way to approach these kind of things, right? Which is, hey, let's build an alliance. I think the way that you use a certain word can either improve, make the situation a very positive experience, or it can start with incredul in, with incredulous behavior, and then it could end up not in a very good way. So just
Yeah.
start with initiating a group discussion and be careful how you want to start the conversation. And mostly, like Claudia said, look for a mediator, look for a coach. And by the way, Claudia is finishing her mediator course. She, she is also a coach. I'm also a coach. Look for somebody that can help you with teamwork, in other words.
Right. The thing is that the more you secure buy-in into the whole premise of this conversation that you're going to have, the more people feel motivated in participating in this conversation, the easier it's going to go. It's not to pull somebody to the table, to the negotiating table, but to the table by their hairs is really not useful. I also find using simple, non-threatening language. We're going to have a conversation about this. Let's figure this out together, rather than let's negotiate agreements and
Exactly. Exactly.
let's keep it simple, low key, because it is just going to be a chat between people that through happenstance or choice now will be residing or working together. So I really think that having this settled, calm, as non-threatening as possible environment created, and securing hopefully some kind of buy-in, to at least give this a shot, is a very good thing. I also think it's helpful to say we can have breaks. We do not need to decide everything tonight. And also, if we decide on something and down the road it doesn't really feel right, or it doesn't really work out the way that we think right now, let's talk about it then again. I think that that also puts the pressure, takes the pressure off. It doesn't need to happen in the next hour and a half. It doesn't, and it's not chiseled in stone, meaning that there's some flexibility to reassess down the road. And I think when it all that does is kind of, uh, I think it sets a tone of good faith and this absolutely deep assumption that things are going to work out. Maybe the discussion, the negotiation might be a little bit, uh,
Shaky.
heated, or God forbid, antagonistic at times, right? But in the end, we're going to figure it out. And so I think that if that is managed already, it's quite good. And I would, after I maybe do my little spiel, if I'm the one initiating this meeting or facilitating it, I would actually at the end of this ask, do you agree with that? With this process, with this way, with just the basic premise that we're here to discuss this to our mutual benefit. And, I would ask and I would insist on a yes before I go forward. Because
Mm,
it's like, it's like, okay, so what, you don't seem quite sure. What do you need for you to be okay with moving forward with this conversation? Right?
mm,
So, like, if there's objections, handle them from the get-go. And, those are, I think, initial steps before you even get to the "I do not want you to touch my cat."
yeah.
Before you even get to that, but just the general, okay, we're here to figure this out.
Mhm. Perfect. You know, I think the other pointer that I would mention is something that I was saying about values. So one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that each one of us have core values that we take with us in every social setting, that we take with us to work, that we take with us at our families' homes, friends, cousins, nephews, whoever houses you go to, you are followed and you take those core values with you. And what is important is that in this conversation, in this group discussion, uh, uh, call it group discussion, I'm sorry, or alliance, um, you have to make sure that this is not violating. I'm sorry, that's a very strong word, but most of the times that's how it feels when your values are not being stepped on, not because they intended to, but because there is something that you don't agree to, right? And it's in one of your values. And just like Claudia was saying, speak up and say, look, I don't agree with this. What I would say is that don't, I mean, Claudia pointed it out as well. It's a good point, is that nothing has to be resolved in one day. Rome was not built in one day, right? So if you don't agree with something, don't fight it out. Don't discuss it to a point where it becomes too passionate. Think about it, write it down. That would be another pointer, by the way. So I'm kind of jumping, but write it down so it makes sense to you, or that the next day you can say, yeah, I still don't agree with this. So just identify your core values. That would be number two for me.
Right. And I think that it helps the person that you're talking to, let's call it the other party,
Mm-hmm.
it helps the other party if you tell them why you are against something. Do you
mhm,
understand that you kind of give a little bit information about your intrinsic motivators of why this might be acceptable to you or not,
mhm,
and bear a little bit maybe your beliefs behind it or your core values, right? Like for me, this brings up these and these and these feelings, thoughts, resistance, needs, and so on, because of blah 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 blah. Do we have some wiggle room on this issue, rather than just saying there, you are wrong and we have to do it my way, right? But a little bit like back it up as well, to help the other party understand where you're coming from. The same way that you want to be understood, they also want to be understood and understand.
yeah,
Because actually,
yeah,
when I'm in a situation like that, I do not uh, only want to be understood, but I want to understand. And that, I think, is a huge resilience skill right there. That pops up his head is this idea of other centeredness, meaning
mm,
that you do not just center on yourself all the time, and keep this truly objective, sorry, truly subjective, egotistical, everything about me
mhm,
attitude, but actually saying, okay, it's about me. Okay, I'm human. Of course, it's about me. But what about the other person? And just like you try to figure out how you're going to talk to your mother-in-law, she's probably also trying to figure out how she's going to talk about you, right? And she has her own like internal whirlwind going on. And so understanding what makes her nervous and her understanding what makes you nervous, and then figuring out how you can deal with that is at the core of it, right?
yeah. Yes, and and funny enough, we were talking about this yesterday, right? You and and I spoke with my husband last night, and I said, "Hey, look, this is what I was thinking. This is what I spoke with my coach, and she made me realize, well, if you're afraid, then most probably so is she. This is a big event. This is a life-changing event, not only for you, but also for her, that she's lived longer than you. So she kind of has the upper hand on this. Like, I should be kinder and understanding and kind of say, if I feel it, most probably she feels it too. So to that point, I think the other part of it is that we have to set clear rules and be very specific about them, because I'm going to quote Brene Brown, my hero. Um, you know, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Just very simple two words, I mean, a phrase. And, but it's very true. If you're not very specific exactly on how you want things and you start assuming, then guess who steps in? Your gremlin. That's who steps in,
Yeah.
because everything starts becoming assumptions after assumptions after assumptions, and then the misunderstandings, and then the difficult things, and then you know
Mhm. Because then you leave too much open to interpretation as well,
yeah,
and then
uh-huh,
the interpretation changes with the emotional state of the person, changes with the context and the situation. So definitely, being clear is really quite important. And yes, write it down. Why not? Why not write it down? The other thing I think is also, maybe in preparation, as you prepare for a conversation like that, or you're in between talking bouts, right? And you
mhm,
are by yourself. It's like really becoming
mhm,
clear, what are for me non-negotiables? Like what really is so important to me that I cannot concede on a particular point. And how can I make what can I do to help the other party understand this?
Mm, mhm.
Right? What can I do to sell this? That this is really important to me, and how can I bring this across? It's also a clarity thing. I think that not just assuming and not just banging your fist on the table and saying this will I will never concede to this, but
Mhm.
actually really making a point of why it makes sense in your own personal universe to maybe observe that and then see where the wiggle room is in this new forming relationship around that.
Absolutely. So that would be kind of like establishing consensus, which, it sounds very, "Ooh," but it's really about, encouraging everybody, like a consensus. Think about, what do they do when they are counting people? A census, just think about it, come together, census, questions, how to work together, how to live together, what are we doing together? And it's about facilitating discussions, resolving conflicts. So everything that Claudia just said and what we've been saying, just make sure you do that. So that would be the other pointer. And the other one that I mentioned before really quickly is to put it in writing, right? Again, Claudia mentioned it again. So there's a reason why we're giving you these pointers, and that is because they actually work, right? It kind of clears your head. It reminds you to stay focused on the topic. That's one of the most important things, so that you don't deviate, because there's going to be discussions, there's going to be differences, there's going to be something. So you handle those, but then you make sure that by writing them down, you are able to bring yourself back to the focus of what is the real purpose of the whole conversation,
Yeah.
right? And like Claudia said before, also make sure that you revise them, right? When something is not working, come back to them and
Right.
revise them.
I would even go as far as at the end of the conversation, put an appointment in your schedule to assess.
Mhm.
Literally, it's like, okay, so let's give this 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or whatever it may be,
Yep.
depending on complexity, and let's have a chat about how it's going.
Yes.
And I really think that's important. The other thing we touched upon it earlier is accountability. Let's give each other permission to hold each other accountable to this, or in maybe a stronger word, to police each other.
Mhm.
Meaning now we have these rules and they are there to be observed. If now I
Mhm.
see that you are overstepping these bounds or not adhering to the rules, giving each other permission that I can call you out on it. Hey, do you remember the rule about not putting empty milk cartons into the refrigerator? So please next time just recycle the box. And you know, I really think that the rules will be adhered to, and you can even say like, what are the consequences of not adhering to it? If you want to have a family thing where swearing is forbidden, and every time you say a swear word, you have to put $5 into the swear word piggy bank, okay?
Okay.
then it has to be enforced, and there's already kind of a preconceived like rule, law and order kind of situation from it. But obviously but that's a rule like any other. Again, there's no universally accepted set of rules. There's no right or wrong. There's just what works for you and the people at the table, and what doesn't work for you. So you don't need to copy anybody. You do not need to go do what your role models did. Do what's right for you.
Right. And if I may, I would like to add one thing from my side, and then you can take take the floor so that we can close. um, stay curious. Like, it's very easy to giving into our fears that takes us to get mad, right? Because fear is the basis of everything. So when you fear something, when you're not sure of something, when something is bothering you, it usually is because there is something behind it that you cannot explain, but normally it's based out of fear. So you take yourself into a dark place where you start doubting, and then, all hell breaks loose, and you start thinking bad about the person, which is, again, the gremlin. Okay. So I think that if we were to stay curious rather than to give it to a gremlin, we would be able to resolve a lot of conflict before it gets too far. And I remember, like, in this last trip that I took um, to Houston, my sister was curious, and I love that about her. Um, she told me, why, when we were younger, when I defended you from my mother's shenanigans, why would you be so upset? And you didn't see that I was defending you. And I thought, because I felt that you wanted to control me, like you wanted to protect me from my mom, but then at the same time you were controlling me, and I just wanted to be free. And she was like this, she just threw herself back, and she was like, I never thought about that.
Mm.
So curiosity makes you realize a lot of things, but when you're closed and you're, Claudia was saying it right, you probably are going to try to tap them, make fun of the person, or there's going to be some inappropriate behavior that is going to probably derail the conversation. When you see that happening, that means that you're not being curious, that you're not trying to ask the questions so that they make sense for you. So that's what I wanted to say. That's my
Makes
last
sense
piece.
for it makes sense for you, but also makes sense and is heard in a certain way by the other party. Absolutely. So last little tidbit here, emotional intelligence 101. Make it about the situation, don't make it about the other person. Don't judge the person, judge the situation, judge the context. Okay. And if a situation is stupid, that doesn't mean that the person is stupid. Okay. If a situation is crazy, doesn't mean that the person is crazy. Okay. Separate what you're negotiating about is context and surface, and it is not about the person at the other end of the table. So perfect. So, wow. I hope that there was some good stuff in here for people that were listening. I really thank everybody who, listened till the very end. I do hope that there's like a tidbit or two in there. If you have anything to add or share, please let us know. You can get in touch with us. Our contact information is in the description of this video. Also, you can always find us on LinkedIn, easy enough. Also, please show us your love and subscribe to the channel and hit the little notification bell. And please engage with our content through a like or a comment. That would be really greatly appreciated. Again, Sandra is in the process of relocating. She, we will not be here for the entire month of March with FreudenFreude, but she is also currently not accepting any new clients. You can however, reach out to me if you need a coach, team coach, or mediator. So that's it for today. Sandra, great job. I had fun. I had
Thank you.
fun.
Me too, Claudia. Thank you so
I,
much.
we want to hear all about the future ground rules that you set
Oh,
in your new living situation with your family.
you know what? Let's put that in the calendar. We absolutely need to touch bases on that next year, because it's going to take some time, right? So
Time.
next year. Perfect.
Okay, everybody.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye bye.
Claudia. Bye.